You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for In Between Drafts. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1074, titled Mark III, or Mark III, or Mark Triple, whatever you want the 3 to be. As usual, we will be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point, so if you have not yet read the latest chapter, be sure to check it out right now for free on the Viz website for up to 3 weeks after the official release. You know the drill. We'll link to that in the show notes, of course. And as usual, we do also have to ask you to come join our Discord if you have any theories or speculation, comments, or just want to say hi to us. I mean, what are the benefits of joining the Discord, Travis, besides, being on a great Discord server?
So credit to our head games editor, Evan Griffin, but the emote game is very strong.
It's good. It's great. Yeah. Also, we do want to whip up an email. So if you'd like to hit us up more anonymously, pretty soon you'll be able to do that. We're going to set one up. In the meantime, my DMs are open on Twitter, at John Negroni. You can always hit me up there too if you have just something you want to add to the discussion. But pretty soon we should have an inbox. So if Discord is not your thing, but it can be your thing. I love Discord. I joined it not knowing what I was in for and being a little bit like, do I gotta? But that was back in like 2014, and I haven't looked back since. So there you go. Okay.
Yeah, Twitter's gonna die anyway, so it's time. It's time to have a backup plan. Yeah.
Who knows if I'll still have it? I mean, I know, and this is off topic, but I know pretty soon I'm not going to have my blue check mark anymore. I'm going to, not be Twitter verified. I've been Twitter verified for a long time, and I feel like it's going to just be a big relief.
Enjoying not having to deal with people reacting to a check mark has been a joy of my account. So
let's make a One Piece Twitter, just a social media site, and it's just like Twitter, but it's, One Piece themed, and the person in charge isn't incompetent. Let's do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, let's recap this thing. So Travis, I'm going to go through the main beats of this. And because I talked to a couple people who did hit us up, and I want to try something a little bit different based on some feedback we got, some really polite and kind and wonderful anonymous feedback. So I'm going to go through the main things this chapter covers, and then jump to you to pick where we go. Okay. Almost like a choose your own recap adventure. So these are the main beats. Obviously, not covering everything, but we have the cover story, of course. Germa 66. And how that thing's going, where essentially they're fighting to be number 2. It's not that major. But into the actual chapter, we have the introduction of the Pacifista Mark III, hence the name of the chapter. The Straw Hats regroup. Vegapunk is still missing. The Punk Pirate Alliance is trapped in the Frontier Dome. There's a saboteur still at large, a traitor. Bonnie has just experienced a painful memory of young Kuma, a child Kuma. The adult Kuma in the present day is still climbing the red line. We assume it's the present day. Pythagoras has been attacked by an unknown assailant somewhere in Building C. Big news, Morgan. He's back in the story. We missed him. He just put out a story that Vegapunk has been kidnapped by Straw Hat Luffy, Emperor Straw Hat Luffy. And last, Vivi and Wapol are revealed to be hiding out with big news, Morgan. Speaking of big news, Travis, where do we even start? Where do you want to go with this?
I think it's best we start at the end, because this is not even something that I thought was on the table on 2 levels, and it's immediately where all of my attention is from. But
it makes perfect sense. Like when you actually start to put the pieces together, I'm actually kind of surprised more people didn't speculate that not just Vivi but Wapol were hiding out with Big News Morgan, because where do you go when you witness the world government doing something sus? You go to the person who can disseminate the true information to everybody, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, it does. For me anyway, and maybe I'm just a big old dummy, it's very possible, but it didn't even occur to me that Vivi was in the same place as Sabo at the at any point during Reverie, it never even occurred to me that, oh yeah, these two events where Sabo saw something he was definitely not supposed to see, and Vivi going missing were not only like tied together, but possibly occupying the same space at one point, didn't even click to me. So adding Wapol there as another potential witness absolutely busts this whole thing wide open for me.
Wapol also explains how Vivi could have escaped, right? Because even if Wapol didn't witness what's going on necessarily, he can hide her by just like gobbling her up, you know? Like, to me, it's like, okay, we don't know what Wapol got into. Like, we don't know what he did or like why he's there. But we have to assume he said he's being hunted, right? The government wants him gone.
He implies he uses the word we, and Wapol doesn't normally use the royal we. So I'm assuming that's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
So he's talking about him and Vivi. Whatever happened to Vivi happened to Wapol. They are now, which is hilarious for so many reasons, because she hates this man so much, and he's not her fan either, honestly. But so this is great pairing by Oda. But more, did they see what Sabo saw? That's my main question. What did they see?
I think it's going to be different. I think that they saw the death of King Cobra. Like, I think that they are aware of what's really going on with the world nobles, in the sense that I think what Sabo saw was what he saw was Eam, on the throne.
Yeah.
And I think that calls for more drastic action in their mind. But I think where like Wapol and Vivi, what they share in common is the fact that they are, part of like the royals. And so if King Cobra died, and I think there's some chatter that maybe Cobra died in Vivi's place or something along those lines. There's some sort of revelation there from the Reverie. We have still yet to actually see for ourselves. Who knows when that's going to happen?
I mean, we know Cobra. We know Cobra was committing the most egregious crime that you can commit.
Yes, being the best gosh darn dad in One Piece world.
It's true that being a good parent almost certainly gets you killed in this series,
or you lose a leg.
You don't come out of this looking pretty. That's for sure.
I think there are two father figures in this story who literally lose their legs for their surrogate offspring or real offspring. It's Zeph, of course. And then also the guy from Dressrosa, Kratos. What was his name again?
Kyros.
Kyros, that's it. I do not care about Kyros, but yeah.
Good. You're never going to let the Rebecca flashback go, and I respect that so
Every
much.
chapter it's got to get brought up. And this one more than all of them. We don't know where Rebecca is.
Yeah, right. But Cobra was specifically asking questions. And as we are learning real time, that is the most egregious crime. That is... you are not valuable enough to justify asking questions. That's what we're learning in Egghead. That's why I think Cobra had to go. And it's entirely possible that they're witnesses. There's the implication that Vivi has changed clothes. That could be all kinds of things. Again, just the fact that she is here putting up with Wapol, sitting next to him, and he's kind of like friendly towards her is... whatever has happened here has got to be drastic for sure.
Yeah, it's like camaraderie through desperation.
Exactly.
It's like the Walking Dead sort of formula. But also, we can't leave out, and we don't know how much Big News Morgan is exaggerating here when he says that Vivi, apparently just the day before, had come to him. So this is pretty recent. Like, they just showed up. It's not like, Big News Morgan bailed them out of the situation. They sought out Big News Morgan, right?
I don't know if it's necessary they showed up, but at least yesterday she was not as firm and poised as she is in this shot.
Yeah, she was bawling, right?
So and I'm glad Oda decided when we're finally bringing Vivi back into the main storyline, which I think is what's happening here. That he's brought her back in, and we're seeing the strong Vivi that we saw, kind of evolve out of our time with her as a member of the crew is the right establishing shot. I'm sure we're going to get a big Vivi cry and we're all going to feel it, but this is a good choice by Oda. If she witnessed her father be killed, this would track with that kind of, crying behavior. So that makes sense. Have you heard the Morgan's theory?
The Morgan's theory?
Yeah, I
didn't know he had his own.
Who Morgan's is. The theory that he is a Zoan.
I have heard that, yes.
And specifically, he is a Zoan of a character we have seen previously but don't have a name for, and using that as an explanation for why certain things like Luffy's picture that was not supposed to make it out made it out, why every single wanted poster of Luffy's has the D in it, even though that's never made sense if they're trying to erase the D clan.
Not necessarily if they want
right.
They want the D clan to be hunted and
Right. It's one of those things where it's tricky to really determine. Like, it's just one of those things that's never made full sense to everybody. So
you think it's like a newsy, like some sort of reporter that we've seen, in the background of all this, the whole story.
The most extreme version of this theory is that Morgans is one of the Roger pirates, and he's just constantly in hybrid Zoan form to hide his identity from everyone.
That'd be kind of funny.
It would be hilarious. And people, again, we've made this joke before that people see the Roger pirates everywhere, even when they should not. And I think, if anything, this kind of debunks the theory that Morgans is actively an ally to our good guys.
No, he's chaotic neutral.
Which makes sense.
He's always been our chaotic neutral guy.
It makes total sense that he's most interested in the most sensational version of the story. That tracks. It's almost a perfect criticism of mainstream media. Once again, Oda being as based as possible. But so I think that puts
he's
a little
caught between two motivations: entertaining the masses, right? Putting out stories that capture the imaginations of people, but he's also, for him it's self-preservation, because he can't exist unless the world government allows him to.
Absolutely.
So he plays this really dangerous game with them where he pisses them off, but he also helps them, actively helps them in exchange for, as he says in this chapter, liquid cash.
Like he says right there in the middle, he very much himself has an understanding of how things work in the world. He says it right smack dab in the center of that. It's the O'Hara incident all over again.
Right. And he knows that if the truth of this gets out, the world government, you could even read into him justifying it as, look, if everybody turns against the world government because they love Vegapunk and there's this big conflict, then that's going to create distrust. It's going to create strife throughout the entire world. And to him, that's not, he doesn't, you could even say he's moral in that sense. He's lying for the greater good. That could even be foreshadowing for, I know lots of people are now saying Shaka is the traitor, and he's the good, but sometimes that's more utilitarian, if you want to say.
I mean, global panic is bad for business. I mean, let's just be straight. You do have to have drama, and like he says, it's about selling. It's about selling. It's about entertainment and setting the narrative, and he's the one doing that. It's also very interesting.
Placating the masses, opium for the masses. Yeah.
So it makes sense that he's making kind of this split decision. And if we're being honest, as much as Vivi, says, Luffy would never do this, this kind of thing, and we know kind of the ins and outs of it. From a certain point of view, that's effectively what the Straw Hats have done at this point. They've literally got Vegapunk, and they're keeping him away from everyone else. And, well, they don't really have Vegapunk, because we'll switch back to it in a second here. But, from a certain point of view, that's kind of exactly what's happened here. They kind of showed up on this island, and all of this stuff started happening. And that's just good old-fashioned Luffy luck, but the world doesn't know that. One final note, and I want to ask you something before we jump elsewhere. I know I'm making a big deal out of 2 pages of this manga, but that's one piece for you.
Okay, I am too.
Who called him?
Stussy.
Do you think that?
I think it's Stussy. I think Stussy has every reason to, especially because she's the one who knows Big News Morgan. Has an actual rapport with him.
That makes the most sense.
Yeah. The only other person who probably would have done it is Vegapunk. And I think that he has too much on his plate going on right now to even consider doing that, unless because it would have made sense if he had let Big News Morgan know earlier, but yeah, I don't see it.
Could it be a Marine?
It could be it could be somebody on the island just being, but that's the thing is
it could even
the
be
Marines.
What about Kizaru ships?
Well, that's the thing is they wouldn't tell him that they're trying to assassinate Vegapunk, right?
I don't know. That's why I'm kind of there's a lot we don't know.
who's going to trust that information with Big News Morgan? Like, to me, it's either there's like a spy, right, in the Marines. That would make sense.
That's my question: is this a leak, or is this being fed to him by the government?
But it would have to be a spy within CP0. Like, it would have to be somebody who knows what the orders are.
Maybe.
And I don't think it's any of the ones who've been captured by the Pacifista. They seem loyal.
Maybe not, but we do have other CP0 agents.
I mean, it's Stussy.
right. Stussy seems like the most obvious answer, sure. It does beg the question of what is the gain here by doing this? Because she does know Morgan's. So she knows he's not going to report on this entirely truthfully. So it's one of those things where, like, it's such a small detail, but it was enough to put the to make it specifically that he's got this tip and show the transponder snail being hung up to, like, specifically not show us who was telling him this information. And so it's one of those things where, like, my gears are turning. Like he took the time to draw the panel. Yeah, he took the time to draw the panel. So why? Yeah.
And I don't know, because I the only other, like, I mean, you could say it's like one of the satellites in a desperate attempt, like maybe the traitor, there could be something going on there. I think Stussy's the most obvious, but it's not like the only possible, right? Mm-hmm. I was going to say on the VV stuff, I came across a few interesting comments people made about how there's some really nice foreshadowing about this, just to sort of like tip our hat off to Oda because he always plans ahead. But if you go back to the Reverie chapters when Vivi is leaving Alabasta, I forget his name, but one of her attendants or whatever is like very nervous, like something's going to happen to her. And one of the things he mentions that could happen is that a big bird could snatch her up in the sky. And so here we are. And I thought that was kind of funny. And then somebody else
kidding me? Really?
Yeah. And somebody else pointed out that, like, and if not that, then there could be a sniper could assassinate you, Blackbeard sniper maybe, or meteors could fall from the sky, Fujitora. So, that could be even more foreshadowing that, like, what's next for Vivi could be something involving Blackbeard and then the Marines, or Blackbeard and the Marines all at once. So I think that's enough to conjure up confirmation that Vivi is going to be involved in the final war, I think.
Clearly, but I hadn't even made that connection back. Was that Igaram who said that?
Oh yeah, I don't know his name. But it's the guy with the yellow hair, the blonde hair.
Yeah, Igaram. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought, okay. But, like, I'm trying to remember it. But oh my goodness, I didn't even make that connection. That's twice now. We've had a major reveal recently, like, call back to something else. Like one-off jokey lines or, like, just interesting world building turn into foreshadowing. Is he doing it on purpose? I mean.
Yeah, I think that he has fun and derives enjoyment. We're talking about Oda, derives enjoyment from putting in clues to, like, the mysteries, so that when you go back, it makes you appreciate the story even more. That's something I think a lot of authors love to do.
Yeah, I mean, Oda's been on the record saying that he would have made things harder if he had known the internet was going to be what it is today, in terms of our abilities to connect and analyze the story and learn the language nuances he uses and everything. Now I'm starting to feel like that's what we're getting now. It's like, I'm going to make this harder because I'm going to hide them in the jokes.
Yeah, that's what happened to George R.R. Martin, right, with the Game of Thrones. Like, people didn't start figuring out, the big revelation of that series of books until, like, the internet was really coming into its own and there was such a fandom, because most of this stuff, like, we're not always, we think of this stuff, but we think of it because other people are talking about it and other people come make certain observations that, like, we're all kind of helping each other out. It's how it works. And poor Oda, he has his job cut out for him. But okay, where next do you want to go?
Let's just kind of go back to the beginning. Let's take a quick
knock out the cover story.
Yeah, let's knock out the cover story. Kind of shift gears a little bit, and then we can get into the real meat and potatoes of Egghead. That sounds like a good way to go.
Cover story shows us the three arms, the three tentacles of Mads, Caesar Clown, Queen, and Vince Smoke Judge fighting each other, and in kind of like a worst generation, like the way kind of Luffy and Kid and Law kind of bicker and fight each other. And then the story says 3 bitter rivals in the perpetual war to be number 2, and it's a fun little continuation, because the last one was how we saw. I know a few chapters ago was like they all had their own like inventions, right? And then we see that Vegapunk has his massive invention. It wins a prize, and they're shocked, like, what the heck? And now they're all sort of like, it's like they're resigned to be like, all right, none of us are as smart as Vegapunk, clearly, but which of us is like the second, who's the top dog? Who do you think is the actual top dog, though? Because like, if you look at like their actual accomplishments, like how smart they are, I feel like you could make a pretty good case for, like, it would be hard to make a case for Caesar. I think he's kind of the weak link.
I'm anti-Caesar Clown, so I agree with you.
But like Vince Smoke and Queen each have like pretty significant accomplishments. I'm going to say Vince Smoke, but and when you think about it, Queen he is like the number 2 in other ways. Well, I guess he's like the number 3 of the Kaido pirates.
I think I'm going to agree with you on the Vince Smoke thing, only because he seems to be the most consistently successful on his own. Both Caesar,
his clones are really good.
His clones are really good, and he is the leader of his nation, he's attained the power that goes with that. Whereas Queen and Caesar in particular,
they're lackeys.
They've always been. They've had to cast their lines to a stronger pirate. And yes, Vince Smoke Judge was going to do that during Whole Cake Island, but at that point, prior to that point, he was independent. They were literally a moving nation. They were surviving.
They had climbed the red line successfully.
Climbed the red line, yeah. Like it's pretty inarguable. And of course, if you want to get narratively into it, Sanji is kind of perfect now, isn't he? He's got
perfect.
I mean, from his perspective, he's got the supposed durability of their soldiers, but he hasn't lost his humanity. So, from a thematic sense, because that's always how I like looking at these things. Sanji's existence is kind of like it. He's even transcended Judge's expectations, and he doesn't even need the raid suit. So, and it's good that Sanji can't turn invisible ultimately. It's good for society. So, otherwise, he's a kind-hearted person who is also extremely powerful, like Judge was seeking. So, Judge would see it as a failure still, but like Luffy said, hey, he listed all of your best qualities. What's up with that?
Sanji, he may have been your father,
but he
wasn't your daddy, as Zeph would say. I got to mention Zeph twice in one conversation. Okay, he's one of my favorite characters. Okay, so we have the introduction of the pacifistas, Mark III, and so the big things with this is that they can use the bubble shield, and I think that's very notable. I think there's a really good reason why we're being shown this right now. This kind of like reminder of what Kuma is capable of. The idea is that the pacifistas are a lot stronger than the prototypes we saw at the Summit War. We already saw, I think, the Mark 1, I want to say, like a post-time skip. I think it was Mark 1, right?
PX.
Luffy and Zoro fought.
PX1 might have been, because Kuma himself is 0. So, no, the ones would have been at Summit War. So I think it was, were they also ones or were they twos?
Well, I think the ones at Summit War were still prototypes. I don't think there was a Mark 1 until
I'm looking.
I'd have to double check that, but
it's not that big of a difference either way. Because this is definitely the most advanced just immediately. PX1 PX1 was at Sabaody.
Okay. So they were prototypes, but they were still like they had the 1 marker.
Yeah, they were
so
all
then the
one.
post-time script was PX2. Is that the idea? And then the PX3, I don't.
The way they're kind of broken down here, at least on like the Wikia checks, is the Seraphim are considered a Model 2, and then these ones we're seeing here are 3. So 3 is this is the first time we've definitely seen 3. I debate that, calling that Seraphim like the Model 2s, but either way.
We don't have to get too much into the weeds. The point is that there is basically an army of them, and it's looking like they're going to be the frontline defense against the Marines that are on their way. But here's the thing, like with the Seraphim, I think we can assume that the Gorosei can override their orders and everything, right? So like maybe we'll see them like fight and do stuff for a little bit, but I don't see how, if anything, it's looking like this is just one more battalion that is going to make things more dangerous for everybody escaping.
I agree. I don't really see, like, the fact that they're kind of, I think it's notable that they're not really killing any of these agents. They're rounding them up to a warehouse, presumably to reduce their forces, which I think just kind of reinforces the reality that the Mark IIIs are just then going to themselves become a problem. But that's an interesting little detail from Sent Tomorrow. Yeah, it's just very curious. The bubbling I really like too. That's just a cool way to handle a defense system.
Yeah. I mean, they are better at pacifying now, right? They don't have to obliterate their opponents necessarily. The bubble shield has like more practical uses for pacifying like groups of people. So I think it's like truer to the name than it was. It's looking like Sentamaru is down for the count. Like I think his injuries are still pretty bad. I don't think that he's going to be able to like shake this off like Usopp and Onigashima.
Yeah.
And just still kind of keep going.
I don't think he's coming back as like a Hail Mary play or anything like that. That's for sure.
No, I think he's all but captured by the government. Calls himself a rebel. Like maybe he can escape. Like I could see that happening at least. But yeah, it's looking like this is going to be his like final main contribution to the story. I have to imagine.
It's a good one.
I could even see.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and I could see him at some point having to like be confronted by the Marines. That there could be some interesting story fodder there, or he just disappears and he gets off the island some way. I could see either way happening. So it's interesting. It's interesting that they named the chapter Mark III, out of everything that we get in this story. And it makes me wonder if like it's because they're really driving home the Kuma stuff more than anything else. And then really like Oda is really drawing the parallels between these like, these androids, these robots and the real Kuma, and I just think that that's something to keep your mind on, people listening, if, based on like probably what we're going to learn about Kuma moving forward, right?
Yeah, I think it's a good call out there. The titles, it's always hard to tell when a title should be read too hard into. It is kind of the first thing we see, so it could just be chalked up to that. But there's so much Kuma everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much Kuma. We got to be close to getting the full payoff here. Question for you, though. Do you think Zoro can cut the bubbles?
I'm sure he can cut them. I want to know if he can pop them.
Ooh.
If anybody could cut those bubbles, it would be the person who has experienced them in their fullest. I think it would make thematic sense for Zoro to have like a little bit of a face off against one of these things at some point. Kind of reminding us of what. Oh, I guess nothing happened. Actually, now that I think about it,
it was a weird cut. I've never fully understood that choice by Oda to just cut away and have nothing happen whatsoever. Yeah. But when you say something is the ultimate defense, I don't like power scaling, but if you're gonna throw that out there, I'm gonna ask if Zoro can cut it, and he's gonna ask if he can cut it. That's like
it's like your mind always goes to that.
It's because that's what you
Luffy's gonna wonder if it's gonna give him food.
These characters have grown and changed a lot, but they are still our beautiful dumb babies sometimes, and that's what's great about them.
I think it's interesting that Luffy is like super drained, but he's not asking for meat. It's kind of like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the comedic relief of like, I ran all over the place. I'm so tired. It's like, oh, we have everything on the screen. It's funny. But I don't know. There could be a little bit more of like Oda saying like Gear 5th is not this like easy thing for Luffy to just activate. Like it does kind of like, obviously he still had a lot of gas in the tank afterward. He was able to run without the hover boots. But I still think it's kind of notable that like he's not like a tip top shape after some running around. That's all I gotta say.
And as Zoro points out, he was running at full power, like max effort. He was running with the same kind of energy as fighting Kaido, which is supremely Luffy. But Gear 5th does need a balance patch, I would say, to use a video game parlance there. Just, because everybody's kind of like, well, how are we supposed to have stakes? And obviously, again, One Piece isn't really about power scaling. But knowing that like Luffy is going to come out of this so tired that his first reaction isn't I need to eat food, is interesting. It could be a side effect from Gear 5th. It could just be a gag. It could be just one of those funny things.
It could be that it's not really Luffy.
It could be.
It could be that that's Vegapunk in disguise because his tongue is sticking out. And the real Luffy is somewhere else. Who knows?
I do like Luffy's yelling about like you could see the whole lab here on the monitor, and he's usually not the one to give that very specific reaction, but it's a very apt reaction. And there's the case to be made that the Nika awakening has always had an influence on Luffy's demeanor and physicality, and this is just one of those examples where that might be the case.
I have a theory for what happened to Vegapunk. I think I figured it out. But before we talk about that, I mean, we have the fun little part where like the Straw Hats have regrouped. We get this kind of like review of like, here are the stakes. Here's what's going on. Shaka explains everything exposition style. Atlas is back in action. York is in her like I'm humongous form.
Yeah. I love this panel. This is such a great demonstration of why One Piece is a joy to read.
You just stare at it for a while.
And you're not staring at the whole panel is what's great. Because between the dialogue and the actions of the individual characters that we're seeing through here, we're getting so much information. We're getting kind of character bits. You're getting different conversations happening, and it all flows in the same direction, guiding your eyes through it, so you're not missing any of these details if you're actually reading the page, which is great. We have I didn't even realize how tall York was, that she's like this like 12-foot tall woman, and immediately it's just like the presence of big woman has just destroyed Sanji as a being. That's incredible. I love that stuff. Brooke is even impressed because he's usually the tallest. So you kind of get this interesting height scaling as a result of that paneling too, where you've got Jinbei, then Brooke. It's almost like an SBS question is being answered in real time here.
The shading helps you understand the foreground of like where Usopp is, for example. Like it's really subtle stuff. Like we don't usually talk about styling in the manga because it's One Piece, so it's like one of those things that like has been already talked about to death. But I mean, it's got to be repeated that Oda is an absolute master of like using space and like its maximalist form.
None of it is wasted. I do think it's interesting that Usopp's attention is looking over Shaka's shoulder. I wonder if he's going to key into something before the rest of the crew.
Yeah, I think like for him, his main thing is like, how do we get off this island? Like he's really like, what they just went through is like the lab being destroyed and attacked and everything. I think he's in desperation mode. Yeah. Like, let's get out of here. Him and Chopper are like, we can't leave yet.
And I wonder if he's going to pick up on a traitor vibe, though.
Yeah, because Shaka's being so calm. Like he's become as suspicious as Lilith, I think, at this point. Like in terms of he's taking all this in stride. Like it's fine that it's happening or that it's all part of some sort of plan that nobody else is clued in on. Like that's been probably the main theory from I think we've seen since the idea of a traitor came along, as people have just been like, yeah, Shaka, it's got to be him.
And then we have here before we move on, this wonderful little panel here. I love seeing Robin and Frankie staring at the CP0 agents who made their lives hell for a while, and Frankie's gritting his teeth, and Robin's like trying to show forgiveness while Nami's like, "How dare you!" She's just gonna absolutely boot Rob Lucci where it counts, and it's. I hope she did it. I'm just gonna say it. The man's got it coming. I hope she did. He can wake up and it'll hurt.
We get like several solid pages of just Straw Hat banter, Straw Hat interaction. Like this is where the good stuff is. Like this is always my favorite stuff in the One Piece manga. Like we get one panel where Nami gets to like express her love of treasure. Sanji gets to lust over Stussy as expected. We even get like Zoro being like, "Oh, I guess I'll help," and everyone be like, "No, don't help." And it's stuff like this. Like these are always like my favorite parts of the anime too, because we get to see more of it happen, and a lot of it too is that they're always really good at stretching that stuff out for the anime. So yeah, I mean, it was a joy to read this 5 times, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the Straw Hats are best when they're together. It's a known fact, and it's precious currency because we do have to keep the story moving. We could watch these guys dink around all day long. Zoro
We still didn't get enough of them goofing off on the ship post Wano. To be
No,
honest,
we definitely didn't. I think in talking about Oda space and time, is a very complex math equation in of itself. But I mean, we got a lot to cover still for all of the adventuring that still needs to be done. I love that after all of these years, Zoro is still convinced that everyone else is wrong about his direction. He refuses.
Like, what were they even talking about?
to reflect. It's a. I don't know if you've continued playing One Piece Odyssey, for example, but it comes up often there as well. It's the best joke where he's just constantly like, "No, you're wrong," and it never once has he been correct. It's. I almost want him to wander off and be the one to find Vegapunk, just to finally give him the win that makes them all skeptical.
Yeah. One of my favorite, this has been said a lot, but like one of my favorite framing phrases or like observations about Zoro and Sanji have always been to me that Zoro or Sanji is the comic relief with cool guy moments, and Zoro is the cool guy with the comic relief moments. And it's what makes them like perfect complements to each other. It's not that like one is just purely a comic relief, one's purely cool. Like they're two sides of the same coin, right? And you could even say to an extent like Luffy is all of that. Like he's a cool guy comic relief with cool guy comic relief moments.
I like that idea. That's a good read.
I think I remember somebody said that during like when I was and like in Wano I started hearing people say that. But there's a specific mention in this chapter about Water 7 and Iceberg. And so that had me kind of thinking like, are they coming back to the story, Travis? Are we going to see Iceberg again? It's interesting. We get so much of like, I didn't think we'd run into these guys again. Who else could we run into is like Oda's subtext there.
Oh my goodness.
I haven't thought about Water 7 in ages. I hope Ice Guy's doing well. I mean, it's just begging those characters to come back.
I hadn't thought about it, to be entirely honest. I just was like, oh yeah, Ice Guy. But it is interesting.
They said they were going to turn Water 7 into a ship, so they have a way to get to the New World.
I mean, he is one of like the two people we know for sure could immediately identify Pluton, and we just happen to know where that is now. Yeah, okay, a smash cut to Water 7 sounds possible at this point. Yeah.
Right? Well, I could even see, like if something bad happens and like the ships get destroyed or all we need is like a whole island of shipbuilders to show up and save the day at some point. And then we can look back and be like, oh, remember 300 chapters ago?
Okay. Since you brought it up, we might it's time for pain a little bit here, as it was pointed out to me online.
We're switching to Naruto already?
I've been operating under the Vegapunk pain theory for a while. It's just pain Naruto for a while, but really quick, since you brought up just how long ago everything is, we're not talking about 300 chapters. Actually, as of this chapter, Ace has been dead for 500 chapters.
Yeah. I think Grand Line Review
I saw it online somewhere. I haven't watched any theory videos. I wanted to dig into this, so I didn't cheat this time.
I've seen, I don't think Grand Line Review had any theories necessarily. I think you just commented, but, and Tekking, I watched Tekking's thing. He didn't have a lot of theories. Like he had some wild stuff, but yeah. He's been saving his theories more for like during the week lately.
I mean, when we have breaks, it's good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to do, honestly. But it's been even longer is the point that I'm trying to say. Like, wow, could you imagine them having to explain who Ice Guy is again? Oh man.
Yeah, you would need 300 chapters, like like a whole thing, like a whole flashback arc, just to catch people up. Yeah, I think it was Tekking who said it's like, oh yeah, the anime is probably gonna, like when Zoro says, oh, we haven't seen these guys in a while, they're probably gonna do half an anime episode just recapping Water 7.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would not surprise me.
It's kind of interesting because we go to the Bonnie thing next, and this is where a lot of like wild theories have been running around. I kind of have my own that I'm partial to, but we should probably mention the Vegapunk thing because he's still missing before we get to Bonnie and Kuma. So if we start with Vegapunk, we get like one instance where like we still see him, he's like a baby, right? And we like flash back to when he's like telling Bonnie not to, do whatever, and he's like, shut up, whatever. I have my own idea. I think I know what happened to Vegapunk at this point. What do you think, though? Like, did you have like a leading theory?
It's one of those things where she looks like she's knocking him back. It's one small panel, so it begs the question: why did he draw it this way? Can they not find him because they can't recognize him? If it's Luffy, that's entirely possible. Luffy running around literally just runs past a child. That's a thing he would do. But like if they're looking on the monitors and everything, Shaka mentions that he's been knocked out of frame and is unconscious somewhere. Maybe she knocked him unconscious. He is small now and young. It's very possible he bonked his head. But
I think he's passed out, and I think somebody found him, doesn't know that he's Vegapunk, and hid him. And the person who could do that and do it undetected is Caribou. I mean,
I keep forgetting Caribou is on this island somewhere.
He was kicked off the ship. He probably went into the lab when the dome turned off. He was around there at that time, and we don't know that he went in there. Like the Seraphim had also gone in there. If he had gone in there and then the Seraphim had attacked the lab, and so that could be playing into Vegapunk getting knocked out, Caribou could have found a kid and been like, "What the heck is this?" and then hid him, and is now trying to escape
or kidnapped him. I mean, she's like, "It's a kid. I could sell a kid." That's a Caribou thing to say.
Even if he knows it's Vegapunk and is like, "Oh, this is my bargaining chip" or something, you could read into that too. But I don't think he would understand or predict that that's a Vegapunk. He doesn't know who Vegapunk is.
It's just a thing where you could definitely say he looks like an exotic thing I could sell.
Or it's just like, oh, I'm not going to let this kid die. Maybe Vegapunk was in danger. I mean, it doesn't look like the lab is in disarray in this area. So it's possible that, that has nothing to do with it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. When it comes to Caribou specifically, because he loves showing up where he shouldn't. And
he's impacted the story just heavily before.
Absolutely.
So it's not out of the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if it's not for him, then Luffy's
right.
dead.
We did, Wano doesn't end well without Caribou. And everybody's like, well, what's the game plan with Caribou? And right now, as far as I'm concerned, he actually has the Deus Ex Machina Devil Fruit. So it's absolutely possible that he is running around here somewhere. It's possible he's the traitor. Not even really a traitor. He's just decided to go rogue. All of that's possible.
Or just bumbling around, causing accidents, but I doubt that. I don't think that he has anything to do with it.
I'm willing to entertain any Caribou theory.
I'll mention this because we do have the Kuma and Bonnie stuff, but we can say there is there is somebody malicious out there, because we see Pythagoras gets attacked. Pythagoras is in building C. He just checked the 3rd floor. I don't think we really know what building C is. At least I don't remember if that's been laid out necessarily. The building in the panel is L, so maybe that's what it is. But he says he's commenting to himself as he's walking. He says it's ironic they made such a mess of this place considering the blah blah blah. And then he's looking for the Stella. Where are you? And then he gets attacked. Now there are two ways you could interpret this. It could be that he is looking for Vegapunk because he's the traitor and is going to do something bad to Vegapunk. And so somebody who is good, you could even say Shaka, right, is trying to get rid of him for that reason. Or, of course, the more obvious, the Occam's razor, the simplest answer to that is that the traitor is running around and trying to, get rid of the satellites. But, what do you think? Do you think there's a real traitor?
When we got the Stussy reveal, I kind of toyed with the idea that maybe we were reading a little too hard into things, and that the shields came down, and we were like, oh, there's a traitor, and they came back up, and then Stussy was revealed. So it's okay, maybe that's what happened. Now it very much feels like that's just off the table. Whether you forget who took the shields down or whatever for a minute, but just in terms of there's somebody running around here with a cannon is very clear. Maybe it's just Oda saw conversations happening that were a little bit confused. So this is to help make that abundantly clear. The trader's actually making a move. There's clearly something happening here. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean it can't be Caribou, because it could always be Caribou. But there's definitely something wrong here, and we now know that all of the satellites are functioning and running around. Atlas is a suspect again now. And we know that the two strongest individual people who could deal with any kind of threat, not to say anything bad about Sanji or anybody else, but we've got the captain and first mate, the two most powerful members of the crew, not running around with everybody else. So it almost feels like classic One Piece. We're going to split people into groups, do some combat. So that makes me question if there's more than one running around.
Yeah, like there's factions or something.
That feels like a bit much.
I think there's going to be like a confusion. I think there's going to be like a who's the real traitor kind of thing. Like they're all going to start fighting amongst each other, and it be revealed that it was Pythagoras or something. And that, to me, the most obvious thing here is if it's a cannon, like you said, it's an explosion, then it would probably be Lilith, because we've seen her with a rocket launcher.
Seems like the easy answer to this, which makes me hesitant.
She's the conjurer of the situation. She's they did it. Who else would it be? But I could see it be subverted in the sense where she did it, but she did it because he's the traitor and she figured it out. But then we see a bunch of a tussle, of oh no, it's Lilith, but oh no, it's not. And then, I think that there is something to be said about Pythagoras kind of being the way that he is. And he is a little bit masked, in a way that him and Edison, if there's two of them, or maybe even three of them, all the ones who are wearing masks are bad.
That look more robotic, you mean? Possibly.
Yeah, it's those are the three that are working together to
or could be
do
corrupted
something afoot
to some degree.
Or could have, a greater good sort of plan, and that Shaka only trusted Edison and Pythagoras and is calling the shots, and is when you find the Stella, you have to, kill the Straw Hats or do something evil, do something bad, and that they're causing this, or turn Vegapunk over to the world government. Maybe there's something we don't know about the connections.
We still have that we have that prediction of this, we have the prediction of Vegapunk's death. Shaka's the one who spoke that. Was he speaking, again, royally towards the general Vegapunk situation? Or was he speaking specifically about himself? Is he going to do something that's going to warrant his death? What is that? What was he talking about with Dragon? It makes him so sketchy, even if he's specifically not the one running around, like you were saying, with a cannon or anything. He's issuing orders. That's
true, actually. I wonder if it does have something to do with the revolutionaries that we haven't really factored in.
Yeah,
all this.
If these are all satellites of Vegapunk, but we know Vegapunk is just this big, the most complicated mind of the current age. I mean, it's almost starting to feel like they're starting, much like the Seraphim, to build up their own, not just personalities, but wills. You know what I mean?
Well, even their own sort of decision making, in the sense that okay, our mission is to protect the Stella. Protecting the Stella means killing the Stella. And having some sort of work logic on that.
And it's possible that Shaka even foresaw that with the information of O'Hara. He gets a tip or something, or Dragon gets in touch with him to tell them that they have Kuma now. And he gives, and now that's been established. Or, I don't know.
It could be that they want the world government to assassinate the Stella for Dragon, so that the world knows that they did it and turns against them.
I mean, we don't even necessarily know that Dragon wouldn't. This is so tricky, because I'm going to tiptoe into a direction.
Yeah, Dragon did say that, Saba would never do that or whatever, but he has shown some humanity.
We don't have a a moral scale assigned to Dragon. I'm going to tiptoe in a direction I don't like, because I don't think, for many reasons that we know about Oda personally, and just through his writing, I don't want to ascribe a certain negative look on revolutionary as a concept. But we haven't really engaged with the revolutionaries as an ideological setup until recently, with the information we.
We just know they're anti-world government, and like Vegapunk has done so much for them that I could see Dragon being like, this isn't the same thing as like Sabo killing King Cobra. Like, you know, I do think that like I could see Dragon going to that.
I mean, we know, he confronts Vegapunk about it in the flashback that we got about him working with the world government and how he has a problem with that. And now you look at the Mark III pacifistas, you look at something that has, hypothetically speaking, an impenetrable defense, to be tested by Zoro, but, we have these running around. They've gotten a good look at just what has happened to Kuma in terms of his physical form. The issues with Sabo running around and just the disappearance of an island. It may be a point where Dragon's like, okay, we're putting our foot down here. It's time to do something about this. You have to make a decision. And maybe that's where the conflict is coming from.
Maybe that's where the conversation ended, where like Shaka tells Dragon, like, the world government's going to kill me, and they work out a plan of like, okay, they're going to do this, but we're going to allow them to do it and use it as a trap and like present irrefutable evidence that this happened, right? And then switch over to the revolutionaries, assuming that like Shaka could do that. I mean, maybe they just all assume that they're all going to die too and they don't care. That would be my first guess. I think that could really move the story along, because that if Vegapunk escapes the island and that we get that revelation, we now know that it's not just the world government hunting Vegapunk, it's also Luffy's dad. And that finally puts Luffy and his father sort of like in a situation where it makes sense for them to like confront each other, because it would be over Vegapunk. And I kind of like that vein, of possible like,
that is a good point. We haven't really considered too much. Like, we've considered where we're going next after Egghead is eventually done. But in the event, that seems to be the obvious answer. But in terms of, we've talked about, do they leave with Vegapunk? Which Vegapunks do they leave with? What's the end goal? Are the Vegapunks really just going to hang out with the Straw Hats for a few arcs like we've done before? That seems weird.
I think they're gonna kill each other.
They're all gonna get sick of Sanji and finally kick him off the ship or something. It's one of those things where you really think about it. You talk about the Straw Hats, and he's an emperor now, so we know that like doing this is not going to immediately incur like fleets and fleets and fleets of military on him, because like doing that is, well, technically already happening. But more importantly, like they're not just going to do that. They need a tactical move. So it's kind of this weird situation where it's not like a Kinemon situation or a Vivi situation where like they've joined and they have an end goal that they're traveling to. The Vegapunks are just trying to get out. So where are they supposed to go?
Yeah.
And the revolutionaries could be the answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they have kindred, I mean, I do kind of think that based on what we've just said, I could easily see like the satellites fighting each other, and some of them being like straight up killed, and then the ones remaining sacrificing themselves in order for the Straw Hats to escape with the real Vegapunk. That's kind of where I see it. Or getting co-opted by the Marines in some way, which I don't know if that could happen. But this kind of leads into my Kuma theory. This kind of leads into, well, we're doing it. We're doing it because I think I figured it out. I think I got it. Based on this, some of the stuff we've already talked about on previous manga recaps, and this flashback we get where Kuma is like a little kid and he's crying and he's clearly like a slave, right? And there's this mirroring between when he was a slave and Mary Joie, and we like cut to him, the present day Kuma still climbing the red line. I think that it's almost sort of like trying to lead you to believe that like, oh, he's he's in Mary Joie or something. But I think he's in God Valley at this point.
Oh.
I think he was a slave at God Valley. And I think this whole revelation, and this isn't the theory even, I think this is just like, I could see this being the case because the timeline seems to match with when the Rocks Pirates show up. And I don't think that he was at Mary Joie. But there's got to be some sort of explanation for how Kuma ends up going from clearly like being this abused slave, where like they're talking about like they'll kill us if because he's trying to escape this place, and so they start beating him to bring him back. But then the Rocks Pirates would ultimately show up, And there's a gap between that and him being the king of the Sorbet Kingdom. So I'm kind of wondering, did he in some way somehow help save the celestial dragons in a bit of a reversal, like, or at least a few of them, when the Rocks pirates attacked? Because we know Garp and Roger ultimately were the ones who beat the Rocks pirates, but it could be that Kuma helped as well, or like helped save some of them, and as a result was like allowed or like given some access to Mary Joie or something like that. That's kind of where my head's at with that right now. I'm sure I have some missing pieces there, but I could easily see that.
That is an interesting thought. I mean, so
still not my Kuma theory.
Yeah,
this is just like the precursor.
So we're still not the Kuma theory. Okay, I'm gonna let you keep going.
No. This is just kind of like some.
You're cooking.
It's a mild speculation. I'm cooking a little bit. I'm throwing some spices in, and yeah, I think that like it's too boring for him to be at Mary Joie. But why would he be going to Mary Joie? And I think it has something to do with Bonnie's mom. So like, if Bonnie's mom is a noble, maybe even a celestial dragon, he could have married into becoming like the king of the Sorbet Kingdom. And then I wrote down all kinds of like speculation on what could have happened next from there. But I kind of want to go back to the idea that Bonnie is a clone. Hear me out. If only because if like Kuma fell in love with like one of the other like celestial dragons that he saved, and like they got married and he was in love with her and they ruled the Sorbet Kingdom or whatever, but were hated because she's a celestial dragon, which should explain like why he's considered a tyrant or something. That kind of gets into some dicey territory. But then let's say that we know that there was like an uprising, right? In the Sorbet Kingdom that could have led to his wife dying, and then it would make so much sense then for him to have cloned his wife into Bonnie to be his daughter. And then to do that in exchange, he would have to basically give Vegapunk his body for science.
That's okay.
This is still not the Kuma theory, but this is part of it. But what do you think of that?
I think it's a little. I think the you're my daughter wife is a little cagey.
He's not a good guy.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, he was called Tyrant Kuma for a reason, right? But just knowing, I don't know if you know that they're doing a Rurouni Kenshin anime reboot, but it feels a little too in celebration of that, if you get my drift there. It's a little dicey.
I think I agree. I agree. But I do think that there is some sort of like surrounding peripheral evidence of for Weevil, like Weevil being a clone of Whitebeard, being viewed as a son, not of being actual like a surrogate for Whitebeard, and like clones being treated in that way. So like not like a clone from whole cloth, but like having children through the process of cloning, I think is how Oda would try to justify.
So
not that he would do it successfully.
A carrying on the will kind of deal. This is what you're saying then.
If we're trying to avoid being canceled, then yes.
Okay, all right. I like the idea of Kuma's relationship with someone being a factor here, because that doesn't come up as often as you'd think in this series.
Right, and yeah, the idea that like he would be like related to royalty. Maybe the Bonnie clone stuff is a little too far, but I had to add that in there. But okay,
keep cooking.
Okay, I'll just distill it down because this has gone on long enough. I think he's about to die. I think he's going to climb the red line. I think he's going to be killed. And then I think the pawpaw fruit is going to go to Frankie.
Okay, so why Frankie?
Remember when we said a Straw Hat should get a devil fruit this arc to keep mimicking Enies Lobby. And remember volume 59? Remember the SBS where somebody told Oda that based on the Japanese lettering and the numbers of like the different devil fruits that the Straw Hats have, there were 2 left, and they were spelled out perfectly by the pawpaw fruit, which meant that the next Straw Hat crew member should be Kuma. And then Oda was just like, no comment.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't mean Kuma would join the crew. It would mean that he would die, and then somebody else would get the pawpaw fruit. And if anyone should get the pawpaw fruit, it's Frankie, because the pawpaw fruit allows you to turn the intangible to the tangible, right? It also has like transportation powers. And Frankie, we already saw, was the Sunny in his bounty poster. And if he could make the Sunny like the idea, like the essence of a ship tangible, that could do two things. It could speak to like one of the hidden secrets of how to like get to Laugh-Tale beyond the poneglyphs, the road poneglyphs, but also that could allow them the type of bubble, the type of coating they would need to go to the moon. Travis, we're going to the moon.
You managed to get it back. You managed to get the moon back in here. Okay.
This is what I meant. So before we even started recording, I warned Travis that this would happen, that I would be just going for it.
Okay. So that is, and I always come to the table with some crazy stuff. So I'm not going to shoot down this theory. And I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to shoot down this theory. Because
it's mercy.
No, it's because
pity.
even if this doesn't go to a straw hat, it's an important fruit. It's an important, very powerful fruit. It's one of these kind of devil fruits where its applications are so broad and arch and interesting that it's the kind of power that a certain devil fruit collecting pirate would have interest in. And if he would have interest in it, we should have interest in it. So this idea that like Kuma is probably on his last legs seems to be, I mean, that's just reading the page for what it says. That's straight up stuff, which means that fruit is going somewhere. As I understand it, we don't have a firm set of rules on how that works, which I'm meaning here being we've seen fruits remanifest nearby before. But we also know, based on Ace's fruit, that that's not necessarily the case. I don't think we ever got confirmation on where his fruit was found by Doflamingo.
True. But who knows more about
that's
devil
what I'm
fruits
saying,
than
right?
anybody?
Like, it's entirely possible that Vegapunk has
a person who just went missing, who has teleportation powers,
would possibly even be able to redirect that devil fruit somewhere, right?
Or create an artificial version of it. But I even then, I think that like, even if it's the artificial version, the symbolic meaning is still there. Also, there's another piece of evidence. So Frankie getting that fruit would make perfect sense because Vegapunk is his mentor, and Vegapunk was obsessed with that fruit, and Frankie, by extension, is obsessed with Vegapunk, and probably knows a lot about the Pawpaw fruit based on like his limited time on this island. So I would just say that I think it fits Frankie to a T, because the idea of this fruit would go so well with him wanting, like, being a cyborg and already having that sort of relationship to technology and like the consciousness, right, within machines, that it's just like Kuma. Like Kuma is like a cyborg himself. So it's kind of like a perfect symmetry.
My hang-up is that of all of the characters to have interactions with Vegapunk, we have not gotten nearly enough of Frankie actually being validated by Vegapunk as a mentor figure or anything like that. So if it were to happen,
we haven't got the he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy.
It's not
Frankie.
the same thing as like Ray. It's not the same thing as like Rayleigh training Luffy, for example, or Mihawk training Zoro. There was not a specific like one-to-one handoff. That doesn't discount this. It means that this could be where this happens. It just hasn't felt set up beyond people really being like, these two characters have a connection. That said, Frankie has had a particular mind on Bartholomew Kuma in the past. Several of the Straw Hats have, but Frankie is the one who found him guarding the Sunny all those chapters ago, and
I didn't even think of that. Good point, Travis. That helps my theory a lot.
I'm trying to tie these threads together a little bit more for you. It's one of those situations where like you could connect some of those dots, and at the end of the day, Frankie is a lot like Kuma in a physical sense when it comes to size, when it comes to the kind of unique makeup of his body, being a cyborg, being this like revolutionary thing. And if they do leave with Vegapunk, and we have a situation where Vegapunk is going to be on the Sunny with us, there is almost no chance that him and Frankie aren't going to have that conversation at that point. So this doesn't necessarily mean that all this has to happen in the next chapter, but these, these little pieces could absolutely fit together in this way. I'm not going to shoot down that idea. I think, we are going to have a loose pawpaw fruit here very, very soon. And somebody is going to want that fruit. That definitely sounds viable to me.
I just hope that I have converted you to, at the very least, converted you to being like, it's possible. It's not completely absurd.
I have heard far more absurd things. I think you're picking up on some vibes, and the vibes are definitely there. So, we've guessed stuff, like as a community, we've guessed stuff in One Piece based entirely on far less than a vibe. So, again, like you're absolutely right that it's not unfeasible for another Straw Hat to get a Devil Fruit. It's not unfeasible for us to get a Frankie upgrade in general. It's very feasible that we are at the end of Kuma's life, especially since now we're going to get his story. I think even if, again, it doesn't play out exactly like this in the immediate, it's not impossible until somebody else eats that fruit.
I think that's everything I had notes wise. Saved the weirdest for last. I did have one other note that I forgot to mention earlier of like we're getting more and more like indication or an understanding for why the Navy was so confident that they didn't need the warlords anymore with the these new pacifistas and the Seraphim, and like it's certainly seeming like less of a like unforced error like it did all that time back. It's like, man, why would they be wasting their time like fighting against the warlords when all this crazy stuff is happening right now with the emperors? And we're kind of seeing that play out in a way that makes more sense now. But last thing I had, so we had a theory from a listener, King of the Pirates, a theory involving Blackbeard that I wanted to mention if I can.
Before you dive into that, I do have one more thing that I want to note about the Kuma flashbacks. We kind of slid around a bit on that. Wherever this child Kuma is and getting beaten, and the people beating him are also seeming to be not the original oppressors in this situation.
Yes.
We have heard talk before about his race being not necessarily human, about being something else. It's notable that this child Kuma, I'm just going to point it out, doesn't have wings. Doesn't have the ears. We know the ears were pawpaw fruit. I'm pretty sure at this point we know for sure the ears were pawpaw fruit because of the pads on his hands too. But he doesn't have wings. Some people have kicked around the Lunarian idea.
But I mean, we've seen Kid Kuma before,
right?
And so it's not like that big.
I'm gonna throw a bone, and just say, it sounds like to me that he's being experimented on. And this might be because I have Trigun still on the brain, because I'm working on my review for this week's episode. But he thinks he's going to die if he goes back anyway. Wherever he's going back to, and this could be as soon as next chapter that we really get this for real. It seems like that might be where we're going, based kind of on like where we've left things off. But it would track with what we know about other kind of unique individuals, what we know about his hesitations, with letting Vegapunk get into those personal memories of his life. It might even be why he trusts Vegapunk versus anything else, is that Vegapunk showed him kindness as a person rather than as a test subject. Whatever it is, he is going to be subject to some sort of physical torment here. And I think that we're going to get the answer on what is Bartholomew Kuma at the same time that we find out who is Bartholomew Kuma.
I like that a lot, because it would certainly tie some stuff together on like why he would be in this situation. Because my only read of it was like him escaping was like a big deal, because like, they'll kill like the people who didn't escape, but they do say that they'll kill every last one of us, which puts like some undue importance on this like one.
It makes it sound like, if I might be so bold, a Mads without a Vegapunk.
Sure.
if you will. Vegapunk has a conscience. Whatever you can say about his actual decisions, he does seem to be making them based on a moral framework. But we also know that there are a lot of scientists running around the One Piece world right now who don't operate that way. And it would not shock me whatsoever to find one more. And it may even, because again, you're talking about moral frameworks in Vegapunk specifically, we know that him and Dragon have disagreed about what Vegapunk has decided to do. Every time a pacifista, has had caused problems for our Straw Hats or has, helped suppress someone somewhere in the world on behalf of the world government, Vegapunk is responsible for that. Whatever else you could say about him as a person and how we know him now, he's responsible for whatever those pacifistas do, whatever the Seraphim do. He created them. They would not have been attained without his help. You could then look at a situation where prior to Vegapunk being involved, the experiments and studies done by the world government or funded by the world government make the ethical breaches by Mads look like child's play. That's entirely possible. We are supposed to have a disdain for the world government that has no end. So I would absolutely buy into something like that. That Vegapunk sees himself as the gap between the government's own disdain for those that they are researching and more suffering. So yes, he's helped create some bad things, but it could have been worse kind of situation.
Yeah, he's just a punk.
He's just a punk.
Yeah. I also think it's kind of notable, too, that when we see Kid Kuma, the idea that like he's being experimented on, like we don't really see, we never get a good look at what he's wearing. So we kind of get the sense that like he's huge, right? But we don't get it. There is something kind of interesting about that to me, is that I wonder if we saw more than just silhouettes, like we'd get an even clearer indication of where he is. But I don't know. That could be me reading into it. I'm sure we'll find out more pretty soon.
It does seem that way. He's been hovering on the edges. Let's talk about Blackbeard, I guess.
Blackbeard. So this is a theory that was in our Discord. And you can see theories like this and speculation and stuff like that in our Discord as well. Links in the show notes. But so this is from user King of the Pirates. Someone we know named, I won't give away his name, but without his permission. But he has this theory that he thinks that Blackbeard is from Drum Island. So I'm going to read this theory out loud, and then Travis can give it the same pity and mercy that he showed me earlier in this conversation. So Wapple showing up at the end, along with my recent fascination with Teach, in parentheses, has anyone other than him and Luffy straight up said they want to be king of the pirates. Had me digging a little, and people think that he was born on Drum because of all the talk about he never sleeps, which Luffy once said people from snowy places don't do, or else they'll die. Then there is the fact that they were doing all kinds of sketchy research there on devil fruit powers, etc., plus the fact that he attacked it, Drum Island, before Luffy got there. That, along with the way Wapple does his digestion thing, which could get really weird when you think about how it would work with a fruit, all adds up to something really suspect, or at least the first real hints about all his nonsense. And so I wanted to bring this up, Travis, because I did mention earlier that there was the foreshadowing that a sniper might try to assassinate Vivi, and that could possibly bring the Blackbeard pirates to Vivi and Wapple, and so there could be something going on there. But do you think Drum Island, a place where people don't sleep?
This is again one of those things where it's you can't say no because you can't really prove a negative, right? That is something that has been said before, and Teach's not sleeping thing has come up multiple times in the story. Rule threes, etc., etc. There is something about his body that is messed up. I will point out that as far as we know, Chopper sleeps. So
but Chopper is a reindeer.
Right, but
he doesn't get as cold.
Right, yeah, it's kind of tricky. As far as I know, we haven't seen another character actually do that, and Luffy's an idiot, so grain of salt his knowledge. But we do know that there's something up with his body. Again, though, I'm gonna steel man this a little bit. I don't want to tear down anybody's theories when I can't say definitively no material points this way. So
or at least put out your own ridiculous theories at the same time.
You know,
so
right?
We all get to.
Right. It's one of those things you can't prove a negative, and they haven't said where our dear Marshall D teaches from. So why not? What I will say is there is a resident of Drum Island who does seem to know at least a little bit of the true history, who does seem to know more than she's letting on. And Blackbeard is also one of those people who at least seems to know more than he's letting on. And if he was a resident in a place where someone else also had that information, it would be an explanation for how he gained that information. So if Drum Island does turn out to be important, and I think Drum Island is personally one of the most important arcs in the entire series, especially now when you keep in mind that that's where we got introduced to Luffy's devil fruit, it's very important. The Will of D was first mentioned there by Kureha. So
that's true.
So, steel manning the position. Is Drum Island something that should be considered all this way into One Piece? I think so. Drum Island is the place where Oda specifically outlines the concepts of inherited will. It's where he plants the seed of the human fruit. It's, we get one of the Straw Hats, so it's immediately an important chapter. Wapol just showed back up. Vivi was there for Drum Island, and one of her big character moments was explaining to Luffy, the need to have grace when asking for help. She taught him that. And he would then go on to reverse that and teach her how to stand up for herself and accept help, and grow those two. So, this idea of Teach specifically, it's not where they found him in the flashback with Odin. So I'm questioning just, I'm thinking about how far away all of these islands have to be, and kind of being like, if he's gotten this far on his own, does he need the Whitebeard pirates necessarily?
I mean, it is pretty close to the beginning of the Grand Line, which is close to the end of the New World, right?
Drum Island, I don't know if I would put it closer to Sabodi than other places we've been, but I am not the geography
I'm
expert.
saying close to like where Reverse Mountain is.
I guess so. I guess if Teach went the other way to locate Whitebeard, that would be. I mean, we're getting a Blackbeard flashback at some point that's going to actually answer this question, I'm sure. But I can't discount it. I can't say it's a bad idea because you can't prove a negative. And I do think Drum Island is an excellent arc that has a lot of long-term impacts on the story. So going back to that to reveal, that's in that theory. By the way, you didn't mention this, but the first rumblings of one Blackbeard Marshall D. Teach was in that arc as well. He went there. And he specifically overthrew it. He deposed Wapol, they kind of ransacked it, and then they left. And when you put it that way, that is an interesting point. They just kind of left. That's a weird. It's almost like what Luffy does. But they've only done it for that one place, to our knowledge.
That we know of.
And so that's curious.
We don't even know.
That is that. Why would he do that? And that's kind of where I think this theory is coming from. Is what does Drum Island mean to Blackbeard? Was he just having a lark? It's possible, but I mean, it's odd. It's odd behavior from what we know of him now, and maybe it's just an inconsistency because Oda was just name dropping so that we would see him eventually, because we wouldn't see him again until the next saga. Any word of him, but it's not nothing. That's for sure.
There was another question about has anybody actually said I want to be king of the pirates besides Luffy and Blackbeard? And I think at one point, I know Big Mom once said that I would have been king of the pirates by now if it wasn't for, blah, blah, blah. So we've seen it in a regretful form. But I think to address that, I think she and Kaido have been gunning for it. I think there's a reason they have the road poneglyphs and Shanks has it, but I guess we just haven't had them be like, oh yeah, I want to be king of the pirates. It's
not every antagonist's dream, of course. But
Yeah.
we do know it was at one point a dream of Crocodile, based on not necessarily him saying it out loud, but other characters knowing that about him and kind of calling him to the mat about it. It seems to have been a goal of Moria's at one point.
I think Buggy said that he wants to at one point.
Buggy just wants all the treasure, so by default he wants the One Piece. So, and I'm sure he'll get it. I'm sure at the end of the day he will, in fact, actually be the king of the pirates. But yeah, there are some characters who have expressed the desire. Obviously, basically, most of the supernovas are kind of directly implied to be having that goal. That's changed recently. I don't know if that's necessarily Trafalgar Law's goal anymore.
We don't have a lot of them left at this point.
We don't have that many of them left, but the Chad Eroge, however you say it, he has done nothing in this story, just letting everybody kind of pick themselves off. So, maybe that's his.
Guy?
Yeah, the monk guy. He's not done nothing.
No, he defeated Cracker, but then was defeated by I forget who beat him after that. Katakuri, maybe.
Yeah, so then he did nothing. He did not made any moves.
Well, yeah, he was brought down by the Big Mom pirates.
Yeah, but now they're
just
only
able to bring down 1, 2 general. Yeah,
yes.
So he's done. We have Bonnie, we have Law, we have Kid, we have Beige, and I think that's basically it.
And Beige, you could say has a similar goal to Luffy. I mean, Zoro doesn't even really have the same goal. He just wants to make Luffy king of the pirates. I'm
just saying, like, who of the worst generation is still out there?
Yeah, we don't have many of them left. Kid, I don't think we've gotten him on screen saying it, but it does. I mean, that's the goal, right? That seems to be where he's at. I think it's one of those things where it's just, it's Luffy's catchphrase. It's the thing he says at the end of every episode of the anime previews. So it's like, yeah, we don't need it over and over again from everybody. But Crocodile, people. Yeah, but Crocodile for sure is the one that I point to. Is like, no, we've actually evaluated him specifically as like, this is a thing he wants.
Fair enough. Okay, that's all I had for this chapter. Lots of stuff here. Now, okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. I am going to be in Australia and Japan pretty soon. And so I'm not going to be here when One Piece comes back for chapter 1075. And Travis and I talked about it. We're going to wait till I get back and talk about it then. I don't think we know for sure yet if we're going to be getting like 75 and 76 back to back. Obviously, I hope so for the listeners, because that means you get to read One Piece. I'm not going to say like, oh, I hope not, so that I don't miss it. But we should be having some stuff come out while I'm gone. But it could be One Piece related. I won't give anything away, but it most likely will not be a manga recap. So just letting you know that we might be missing out on some discussion then, but we'll do our best to catch up, right?
Yeah, we'll do it, and at least I'll be in that Discord conversations. So that please still feel free to post in the spoilers channel, please, when talking about the manga recaps, and let's have some chats in the meantime.
Yeah. And then when I come back, your homework is, my homework really, is read Drum Island on the One Piece manga and reread it. And we'll have a little bit of a pop quiz maybe when we get, not really. But, we'll have too much other stuff to deal with. But that'll do it for us this week on Rookie Pirate Radio. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we'll be back pretty soon. So, yeah, see you all later.